an American audience doesn't know New Zealand politics that well. Could you briefly explain what the National Party is and what its key policies are?
Well, we're a party who believe in private enterprise, personal responsibility, self-reliance. So our key policies are aimed at encouraging that as the way ahead. I mean, the way we see it, does a country get ahead on more government or on more hard work, commitment, self-reliance? Well, the answer is the second philosophy. So we encourage it wherever we can.
How does that differ from the policies of ACT?
Well, ACTA are probably a more focused, maybe extreme version of it. They believe in much lower taxes. We want to lower taxes, but we think we need enough to run a decent social welfare system. That there's differences of they're much stronger on property rights. That all property rights should be compensated, for instance, if there's any change in them by a law that's passed. Whereas we take a more moderate view of those kind of arguments.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just shut this door? Just getting a little bit of noise from outside.
Okay.
Oh, there's a block there, yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Okay. So how would you say conservatism in New Zealand differs from American conservatism?
Conservatism in New Zealand's probably reasonably mild by comparison with conservatism in the US. We have a much less presence of religion, for instance, in public life here. The way I'd put the difference is in the US, a public figure, for instance, would need to almost have to refer to some kind of religious belief or at least familiarity with it. In Australia you might, and it's acceptable. In New Zealand you almost wouldn't. So you never hear public figures referring to it. And we don't have the same degree of polarisation around issues like the gun laws. And we have a stronger cultural foundation here of egalitarianism, so that limits conservatism to some extent.
Do you feel that opposition parties have more influence under MMP than they did under First Past the Post?
Oh, no, I don't think they do. Certainly small parties do. They didn't exist under First Past the Post, now they have some say. So insofar as they have a few votes in the system, yes, they can have some influence. But essentially government here still works by having a majority. So it's still majoritarian government, and the government of the day stands or falls on whether it can hold that majority. Occasionally a small party or the opposition can have some impact, but generally public opinion is still the main way that government's course can be changed.
Okay. Do you think that National has changed from a more broad spectrum big tent party under First Past the Post to a narrower party under MMP, or has there been little change?
Well, no, I think MMP's probably had the opposite effect. Under First Past the Post, you have to maintain a support base of 35 to 40%. 40% being the kind of upper limit. Under MMP, we find as a centre-right party that we need in excess of 45% support to look like a viable alternative government. And since MMP's been in, the centre-right support's been split among a number of parties. That's been made it difficult for us to win elections. Now the support's coalescing around National on the centre-right, so yeah, we need to be a fairly big tent party now. I mean, if we get 45% of the vote, that's about our current polling levels. That includes probably a quarter of those people that have never voted for us. Certainly not in the last 3 or 4 elections.
Do you think the influence that third parties have in MMP is proportional to their numbers?
Well, I think there's issue by issue. It depends on the issues. I think on some issues they have very disproportionate effect. It depends on them really. If they pick one or two issues that they are going to focus on, then yes, they do have a disproportionate influence. A lot of the business of government, though, they don't focus on, they don't have the resources or the time, and their supporters aren't interested. So across the rest of the spectrum, they have almost no influence. There's, I think, a growing level of concern in New Zealand that a number of the policies they don't like tend to have come from the smaller parties, and that raises questions in the public mind about the whole MMP system.
Would you say that people are skeptical under MMP, as skeptical as, say, they were maybe in the 1980s?
Well, I think they're still pretty sceptical. It's just different groups have more of it, more and less of it. So under the old system, 20 to 25% of the vote had no effect. Now it does. Every single vote counts. So the people who had what we used to call the protest vote now have parties representing them in Parliament. So they're, I think, a bit less sceptical because they can see a point of view being represented. The other 75% of the voters are probably a bit more sceptical because they see the business of government and of good policy for running the country compromised by a large party having to do trade-offs with a small party.
Would you, do you know anything about McGillicuddy Sirius? I wasn't planning to ask you about this, but you mentioned the protest vote. And McGillicuddy Sirius kind of disbanded around the time that MMP was instituted.
Yeah, well, I do know, but McGillicuddy Sirius Party was a good example of a party that could exist when there was no risk of getting elected. And so they had a remarkable set of policies, some of them actually very funny. It seemed to me that when MMP raised the prospect that it could be taken seriously, they ran out of energy about the same time.
Okay. And do you think that MMP has made politicians more or less accountable?
I don't know if that's changed much, to be honest. What it has done, I think, is it's forced politicians to consider the need to have 51% every day. Under FPP, government was more decisive. It could afford to take some risks because it could win an election on less than 40% of the vote. Now, every day, the leader of a government has to make sure it's got the numbers. I think it's made government more sensitive to public opinion, but less clear about its direction.
How is National's list order chosen?
Well, we have our sort of internal constitutional structure, and in the end, the list order is chosen by a group of about 25 people who represent almost solely the volunteer arm of the party, with some representation from the politicians being the leader and deputy leader.
When people vote the party vote in MMP, are they voting more for the people in the party on the list, or more for the policies of the party?
I think for the policies of the party. New Zealand voters don't take much notice of the list. They don't determine it, as in some of the European systems. You can shift people around on the list. In New Zealand you can't. The party just puts up that list. And our elections have become, as we describe it anyway, more presidential, where they're more focused on the leader and the policies of the party. They need to know that the list is broadly representative, and they need to know that there's some competent people there. But otherwise, if you pass those hygiene tests, which the major parties do, then it's policies and leaders.
Okay. So there is. I'm trying to figure out, because we're running short. Well, I guess we're not really sure.
I've got a bit of time.
All right. How has campaigning and electioneering changed under MMP for National? Not just the strategy, but also the tactics.
Well, it's changed significantly. It took us a while to change, and we had to change our whole constitution of our party in order to a number of things have changed. One is it's much more centralised. We used to be a loose confederation of local organisations. We now have much more central control because previously you were trying to win electorate by electorate, equivalent district by district, whereas now you're trying to get your total vote up right across the country. So there needs to be a much stronger focus on the brand, on consistency, and on the national media coverage. So that's changed. At the electorate level for the individual MP, for those who have constituencies, have electorates, that hasn't changed much. It's still the same basics of politics, door knocking, handshaking, seeing as many people as you can.
Would you say that that there's less of an emphasis on the marginal districts, the swing districts, if you will?
Oh, there's a much less emphasis on the, we used to call them the marginal seats, compared to, say, Australia or the handful of districts in the US that are actually contestable. There's some we want to win at the margin, and there's quite an effort goes in there, but otherwise you're trying to vote anywhere counts, and so you're trying to cover the whole country, and in that sense it's a bit harder.
Do you think MMP or a system like it would work in the United States?
Well, there's so much history tied up in the sort of state and federal relationship and the difference between the two. The US system has all these idiosyncrasies about the electoral college and the effect that all that has. Now look, I think MMP is, it's an unusual system for New Zealand to have picked. I think there's a bit of uneasiness in New Zealand. We're a small democracy, and particularly the idea of having MPs who aren't accountable to anyone in particular is one that's not attractive to New Zealanders, and I'd imagine it would be similar in the US.
Okay. Let's see. So, how has MMP affected the lives of New Zealanders who don't follow politics or current events?
I don't think it's made any difference. I mean, New Zealanders, the New Zealanders' view of politics is that it's a sort of pragmatic thing you have to do, so you get someone to go off and do it. New Zealanders generally aren't natural busybodies. They don't follow politics intensively. They don't go to endless meetings. They don't want to be consulted about everything. They tend to want to elect a government, let them get on with whatever they said they were going to do, and if they don't perform, you just chuck them out and put the other guys in. So an MMP, the people who promoted MMP, I think, imagined a more involvement of the public at large, and I don't think that's happened, and I don't think it will in New Zealand. It's not our culture to be intensely political.
Okay.
Let's change the tack quickly.
Could you tell me a bit about the 2005 tax cut billboard campaign, and basically just a little bit of background on that?
There's any opposition faces the same challenge anywhere in the world of the incumbent has the opportunity to dominate the media in particular, and there's a growing trend to governments using public money to promote themselves through advertising campaigns. So we decided in 2005 that we had a relatively new leader, we needed to cut through with the public in some way that was novel, and so it happened that a combination of a few particular talented personalities were able to put together a billboard campaign, and it was novel, it was humorous, it was quite striking, and it had quite a big impact on public opinion.
Okay. What did you think about ACT taking the tax cut ad and adding their own spin on it, tax cut now?
Well, it was, I think, was quite clever on their part. It probably helped to underpin our campaign because it just made more out of the idea of tax cuts, and it positioned ACT where they wanted to be, which was, don't muck around with something small, let's get on with it and do it now and do it big. So we weren't concerned about that at all. I mean, the way something like a billboard campaign works, or in publishing a DVD, is that the publicity about the campaign is just as important as the campaign itself, and ACT added to that.
Do you worry that ACT might take some of national support away?
Well, it's possible. In other elections they have. What tends to happen is late in our election cycle, in the last few weeks of a campaign, the third parties, the small parties, tend to pick up votes. And the election can be determined on just which small parties pick up those votes. In 2002, the centre-right small parties took a lot of votes off us. Last time, the Maori Party took some votes off Labour. Next time, it's probably whether the Maori Party and the Greens pick up votes late in the campaign. ACT may have run their course. It doesn't look like they'll pick up a big vote.
Well, what do you think of the 5% threshold?
I think it's quite important to have it, because otherwise you get quite a fragmented parliament. We have an exception to it, of course, that if the leader of the party or if someone wins a seat, but they only get 3% of the total vote, they still count in parliament. Now that's something that, on reflection, maybe we wouldn't have put in, but it's there, unlikely to change. So the threshold really is either you get 5% or you have to win a seat, and they're both reasonably difficult to meet. So we're not going to see a whole lot of new parties starting up, because those are high hurdles.
Okay. Let's see. Do you believe that having a party like ACT in Parliament has freed National to take on policies that it wouldn't otherwise?
I think it's important for, under MMP, it's important that, say on the centre-right, that the whole spectrum is represented, and one party can't really represent that whole spectrum. And in the three elections we've had under MMP, you can see other parties trying to pick up the bits that National can't quite cover. So those, ACT have enabled us to be a bit more coherent than trying to represent this whole spread of centre-right or conservative voters. And if they aren't there, then there'll be people who feel unrepresented. They will try and make National even broader than it is, and that will be difficult to manage.
Okay. So I noticed that ACT and the Greens, both minor parties, have official blogs, and National doesn't. And the reason why I'm asking you this is because we're interviewing David Farrar later on in the order, and I was just wondering, just to set the record straight, what's the relationship between National and David Farrar?
Well, this is David used to work for us, and for quite a while actually. So there's really no official relationship. I think the success of his blog is how he's quite clear about what point of view he has, and he does quite a lot of original research, brings up quite fresh issues, and of course we find that helpful when he's helping us, but he's also setting off in a few directions that are going to be quite challenging for National, given the size of the viewership that he has. So no, there's no official relationship. Clearly there's some alignment, but I think his blog would fail if it looked like he was just some kind of mouthpiece.
Well, does National have its own official party blog?
Well, we don't have an official party blog. You go on the website, you can pick up video. There's various individual MPs who do their own. We haven't felt the need to have an official party blog. I mean, one of the issues in opposition is that because of anything you do can be immediately available everywhere, you actually have to be very disciplined, quite careful about what you do and say, because your opponents will pick up anything that might be out of context or just wrong. Someone says something wrong or stupid. So you've got to be pretty careful actually with the internet and the way that everything can be everywhere.
Like Kevin Rudd and the earwax.
Kevin Rudd and the earwax. How many thousand people have seen that?
Yeah. I'm still waiting for the Chasers episode to get to basically come out with like an earwax monster or something like that. So. Other than that, Helen, did you have any questions or anything I missed?
Quick ones. I'll ask you to direct your answers to Brian, just for the camera's sake. How significant a problem do you see? How significant a problem is the waka jumping scenario?
Well, I never thought that was a problem. The government and clearly Parliament hasn't taken it as a serious problem, because the legislation that was designed to stop waka jumping has expired and no longer applies. It was put in by the majority to try and hold the majority together, stop people leaving. As it happened, it didn't really work. So it's lapsed. Look, we're a free country. People elect people to Parliament. If they want to start or join another party, then they should be free to do so. Anyone who does pays the price, which is usually, almost always, they get kicked out of Parliament in the next election.
Do you think that's what's going to happen to Gordon Copeland?
I think it's fairly likely that he won't be back.
Okay, 2 more questions. Do you think in 2008, after the 2008 election, is there any chance that the National Party will have a coalition with the Māori Party? Is that a possibility?
Well, look, small parties want to have influence. We certainly have enough in common with the Maori Party to be able to have a constructive relationship. Whether it's enough to form a government, well, that's yet to be seen. But they, for instance, have much tougher views about welfare than National has. They're very strong on education and education standards. They have quite strong views about property rights, and in that sense they're a pretty conservative party. So yes, we've got sufficient common ground there to make it possible, and we'll have to see just what cards the voters deal us to see where it goes.
If you had to form a coalition government, who would you? Who are the minor parties that you really think would work well?
Well, there's obviously the sort of centre and centre-right parties who have closer affinity with us, even if they have been in arrangements with the Labour Party. And then there's the Maori Party. And again, it depends what they can bring to the table, what we can bring to the table. They may, but I'll clearly act united. New Zealand First, more obvious candidates, but the Maori Party is going to be a key player, and of all of those is likely to be the largest and therefore the most influential.
This is my last question about McGillicuddy Serious. My own favourite policy is they were going to carpet the roads to reduce friction on tyres and solve the unemployment problem. Do you have any of your own favourite policies of McGillicuddy Serious that you can recount for the camera?
Well, I liked McGillicuddy's positive view about New Zealand's place in the world, and they published a map which was upside down, so I put New Zealand at the top of the world instead of the bottom, and that's where we like to be.
I noticed in Helen actually has a map of the world. It's a normal, ordinary map of the world. New Zealand's actually listed twice, once on the left side of the map, once on the right side of the map. So basically, I was wondering what will happen in 2008 in the parallel universe that the second New Zealand obviously exists in.
In the parallel universe, well, it might vote for a different government, so we can. Or they could follow the McGillicuddy Serious Party policy of the Great Leap Backwards, which is all about bringing back horse and carts, getting rid of these newfangled cars and all the problems they cause.
So I think that's it. Are you happy with everything? Anything you want me to re-ask?
I don't have any further questions, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll just quickly pack up.